The birthday party was held in my sister Lindsay's backyard, a wide, open plot just outside Asheville, North Carolina, framed by rolling hills and soft pine trees that swayed like spectators. Her modern farmhouse sat in the center like a magazine spread, white-paneled siding, navy shutters, and a wraparound porch with hanging baskets that bloomed unnaturally well, as if even the flowers had been told to behave perfectly. Twinkling lights were strung through every tree branch, casting a golden net over the party like it was trying to catch something. Maybe time, maybe approval. Long tables were draped in gauzy cream linen with place cards in cursive gold and centerpieces that looked like they belonged in a high-end wedding. Mason jars full of baby's breath, hand-tied lavender sprigs, floating candles in glass bowls. A local harpist sat under a tent on the edge of the yard, playing delicate looping chords like the soundtrack to a dream someone else was having. Lindsay's twin daughters, Ava and Chloe, had just turned 8. They wore identical shimmery rose gold dresses that glittered every time they moved. Their hair was curled and pinned with jeweled clips shaped like butterflies, and when they walked, everyone turned like flowers toward the sun. Sophie stood next to me, her hand tightly gripping mine, watching it all. She had picked out her own outfit that morning, a pale lilac dress with silver trim and a sparkly headband shaped like a shooting star. She said it made her feel brave, like she was wearing the sky. I had helped braid her hair before we left. She insisted on one braid down the side with her favorite purple ribbon tied at the bottom. Sophie had just turned 7 the week before. She was thoughtful, gentle, and the kind of quiet that adults often misunderstand. Not withdrawn, just careful with where she put her energy. Crowds made her shoulders rise and her fingers twitch. But she had practiced saying "Happy Birthday" on the way over, whispering it to herself in the car like a spell. We hadn't seen most of these people in over a year. Some of them I hadn't seen in 3 or 4. And honestly, there was a reason. Or several. But still, I told myself we were doing the right thing by showing up, giving Sophie that sense of family, of connection, of tradition. Lindsay spotted us the moment we stepped into the yard. She was wearing a fitted navy dress with pearl buttons and had a champagne flute in one hand. When our eyes met, she gave a smile so brief it felt like an accident and nodded before turning her back on me completely, mid-laugh, already absorbed by a conversation with 2 women I vaguely recognized from high school, the type who still carried clutches at backyard events. My mother, Diane, walked over shortly after. She didn't hug me or Sophie. She didn't even comment on Sophie's dress, which she had helped pick out over FaceTime 2 days ago. She just gave me that tight-lipped smile I knew too well. Kind that said, "Don't make a scene. Just go along. Be grateful we let you back in the frame." My father, Thomas, sat in a lawn chair by the food table, focused on a stack of little turkey sandwiches like they were going to vanish if he didn't concentrate. He didn't even glance up as we passed. It was like nothing had changed. As if I'd never left. As if I'd never spoken up that Christmas 3 years ago, when Lindsay said Sophie needed to be taught normal behavior because she didn't want to be hugged, and I finally pushed back. But here we were again. Different occasion. Same script. "Mom," Sophie whispered, pulling at my hand. "Can I give them my cards now?" She was holding 2 pieces of thick white paper, folded and decorated with crayon rainbows, little suns with smiling faces, and sparkly stickers. She had drawn each one carefully, one for Ava, one for Chloe, and written a note inside in her neatest printing. "Of course," I said. "You did such a kind thing making those. They'll love them." She nodded, swallowed, and walked slowly toward the twins, who were surrounded by a small crowd of kids holding balloons and slices of cake. She waited her turn, standing just outside the circle, her cards gripped between her fingers like treasures. I watched her smile as she handed them over. Ava took hers without much interest, tossing it on the table before turning back to a girl holding a glittery purse full of lip gloss tubes. Chloe at least opened hers and gave a nod. "Thanks," she said before immediately turning away. Sophie looked over her shoulder at me. I smiled and gave her a little thumbs up. She gave one back, a small one like a secret handshake. Party unfolded in waves. Cupcakes were passed. The twins posed for photos in front of a pink balloon arch. There was a magician, hired of course, who made doves appear and twisty swords out of balloons. Sophie sat beside me on the edge of the lawn, watching, laughing at the silly parts, covering her ears when the magician's microphone popped. Then came the gift bag ceremony. Lindsay stood at the front, microphone in hand now, calling out each child's name one by one. Kids would walk up, be handed a glittery fabric tote bag with their names stitched in cursive thread, and come back squealing, holding their prizes like loot from a treasure hunt. Inside each bag, mini stuffed animals, handmade bracelets, imported lollipops, water bottles with monogrammed initials. It was a second birthday party hidden inside the first. Sophie watched the parade with wide eyes. She whispered to me, "I think the pink bags are for girls and the blue ones are for boys." "I think you're right," I said, brushing a crumb off her dress. "What color do you think yours will be?" "Maybe purple," she said. "Because that's in between." My heart ached just a little at how thoughtfully she always tried to belong. Then Lindsay's voice rang out, "Sophie Owens." She stood. Her name. She had been included. She gave me a nervous smile and walked up slowly. But instead of Lindsay handing her the bag, one of Lindsay's friends, a woman I'd never even met, held out a small, crumpled white paper lunch bag. It had no handles, no glitter, no color. Just a yellow sticky note slapped crookedly on the front, with 3 words scrawled in black marker. "Be better next time." Sophie paused. She stared at the bag like it might change if she looked at it hard enough, like the words on the sticky note would rearrange into something kind. Something funny. Maybe even a mistake. But the woman holding it smiled politely, not warmly, and gave it a slight shake as if to say, "Come on now. Don't make this awkward." Sophie took it with both hands, carefully like it might break. A few people clapped. Soft, scattered claps that died out quickly. No one looked surprised. No one laughed either, not the kind of laugh that would have told me it was a bad joke with good intentions. No teasing chuckles. No winks. Just indifference. Or worse, comfort with cruelty. Sophie walked back to me, slower now, her eyes trained on the little white bag as if it might explain itself before she got to me. She sat down beside me and didn't say a word. I looked at the note. "Be better next time." 3 words. Tilted like a smirk. "Sophie," I said gently, "do you want to open it?" She nodded once. Quiet. Brave. She peeled back the sticky flap and looked inside. I watched her expression slowly dim, like someone turning down the brightness on a lamp. She reached in and pulled out 3 things. A broken orange crayon. A melted, unwrapped peppermint. A gray eraser, the kind that leaves smudges when you use it. That was all. No card. No explanation. Not even tissue paper. She looked at me then, and her face was doing that thing, that awful thing where a child is trying not to cry in front of people. The edges of her mouth pulling upward in a fake smile while her eyes filled with confusion and shame. Like she was searching for the exact moment she must have failed, as if this humiliation was deserved, earned, logical. I knew that feeling. I'd lived in that exact moment 100 times. In school talent shows where Lindsay got flowers and I got a ride home. At Christmas when she got her college books paid for and I got a mug that said, "Keep trying." The feeling of being measured and found lacking without knowing the rules of the test. I reached for her hand. She gave it to me without looking. Across the yard, I heard Lindsay laugh. Not just a laugh, that sharp, high-edged laugh she always used when she thought she was being clever and cruel in equal measure. "Oh my God," she said to her friend, not bothering to whisper. "She's been a little extra lately, hasn't she?" Crying, interrupting, just super sensitive about everything. This was just a gentle reminder. My mother chuckled. A low, resigned sound. "Honestly," she said, not looking at me, "it's good for her. Rachel babies her too much." My father didn't speak, but he gave a grunt. Not disapproval. Just a sound like he was mildly annoyed to still be part of the scene. I sat there, holding Sophie's hand, trying not to shake, trying not to cry, trying not to scream. But what tore at me wasn't the cruelty. I'd come to expect that in quiet ways. What gutted me was the calmness of it, the way no one seemed surprised. As if this wasn't shocking, just standard. Routine. Sophie turned to me and whispered, "Was it because I didn't say thank you?" Her voice was a ghost. "No," I said quickly, squeezing her hand. "No, sweetheart. It wasn't that." I tried to make my voice strong, steady, but it was like trying to stand upright in a rising tide. "It wasn't your fault," I said. "It's not because you forgot anything. Some people, they just forget how to be kind. And that has nothing to do with you." She nodded a little, then held the bag tighter. Caleb had been watching from the edge of the yard. He came over quietly and knelt beside Sophie. "Hey," he said softly. "You did a great job being here today. But I think we've had enough for one party, huh?" Sophie nodded. He reached out and took the bag gently from her hands. "Let's go get you a real treat," he said. And just like that, we stood up. No yelling. No storming out. Just 3 people walking away from a garden full of roses and rot. We walked quietly, not rushed, not defeated. Just with purpose. Like people leaving a house that was already smoldering. No one called after us. No one tried to stop us. Not even Lindsay looked up. We weren't guests at her party. We were props in her performance, and we'd left before the final act. In the car, Sophie sat in the back seat with the bag on her lap. She didn't speak. Just stared out the window with that look kids get when they're trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. Caleb glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Our eyes met. His were calm but stormy. I nodded. He didn't need to say it. This was over. By the time we reached the edge of our neighborhood, the sun had dipped low behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the trees that lined our street. Car was silent. Even the radio had somehow been turned off, as if sound itself had taken a moment of reverence. I looked back at Sophie. She was holding the bag again, the crumpled thing resting in her lap like something precious, not because of what it held, but because of what it represented. She hadn't let it go since we left the party. Not once. She hugged it like it might explain itself, like maybe she missed something, or it would change its meaning if she stared long enough. "Sophie," I said quietly. She looked at me, eyes wide and glassy, like someone trying very hard not to blink too fast. "Would you like to talk about it?" She shook her head, then nodded. Then paused. "I don't know," she whispered. "That's okay," I said. "We don't have to talk. We can just sit together." When we got home, the house felt different. Not colder, just quieter. Like it knew something sacred had just been bruised. The light from the kitchen window spilled onto the floor like warm tea, and Sophie stepped inside without a word, her little shoes leaving faint prints on the tile. She didn't run to her room like she usually did. Instead, she placed the gift bag, gently, on the kitchen table right beside the ceramic bowl of apples and the napkin holder shaped like a cat. She pulled off her sparkly headband, set it down carefully, and walked over to the couch. She climbed up, pulled the Thanksgiving throw blanket across her shoulders, the one Caleb had given her last year, and curled into the corner like she was trying to take up less space in the world. She was still holding the 2 birthday cards she had made. The stars she had drawn on them, once bold and shiny, now looked smudged like they'd melted into each other. I couldn't tell if it was from her hands, her tears, or just time and disappointment. I walked over slowly and sat beside her. "Was it because I forgot to say thank you?" she asked, without looking at me. Her voice was so small it didn't seem to echo off anything. Just floated. I felt my chest tighten. "No," I said. "It wasn't because of that. It wasn't your fault at all." She blinked but didn't look up. "I tried really hard on the cards." "I know you did. I even practiced saying happy birthday. I know. You were wonderful. She paused, then held the card to her chest like it was a shield. But if I had drawn it better, maybe they would have liked it more. I couldn't breathe for a second. I reached out, brushing her hair back from her face, gently tucking a strand behind her ear. Sophie, I said, listen to me. You don't have to draw better or talk louder or smile bigger to earn kindness. You are already enough. You are kind and thoughtful and strong, and you never ever have to earn love. She blinked at me again. One tear slid down her cheek. I wiped it with my thumb and pulled her into my arms. I held her the way I had always wanted to be held, tightly but not too tight. Safe but not caged. I didn't say anything else. I just let my presence say what words couldn't. You are safe now. You are seen. You are whole. Eventually, her breathing slowed. She fell asleep against my chest, her hands still clutching one of the cards. Caleb came in quietly a little while later, carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. He saw us on the couch and paused. He didn't speak. He just set the mugs down on the table and sat across from me. After a long moment, he said softly, "This wasn't about a paper bag." "I know," I whispered. "How many times has it been now?" He didn't need me to answer. He already knew. "The time you brought that pie to Thanksgiving," he said. "And your mom said it was too salty." I nodded. "The time Lindsay said Sophie dresses weird." Another nod. "The time your dad told her to toughen up when she cried at the fireworks." I closed my eyes. I could still hear the boom. Still see Sophie covering her ears, trembling. And the way my father had just shook his head and muttered, "She needs to grow out of that." "I used to think they'd change for her," I said. "That if I was patient enough, kind enough, one day they'd see her. Really see her. And love her." Caleb leaned forward and gently took my hand. "But they don't want to. Because if they see her, they'd have to admit they were wrong about you too." I swallowed hard. I looked down at Sophie, still asleep in my arms, her cheeks flushed, her body curled like a comma in a sentence we were no longer willing to finish. "I can't let this happen again," I said. Caleb didn't respond with words. He just nodded once. Not as permission, but as agreement. Like a vow. After Caleb tucked Sophie into bed, I lingered in the doorway for a moment, watching her sleep. The little crumpled paper bag was still on the table where she had left it. Her headband, too, the one she said made her feel brave, it lay beside it like armor set down after a battle. I could see her chest rising and falling beneath the blanket, steady now. Her hand clutched the edges of the rainbow card like it was a lifeline. I knew she'd probably ask more questions tomorrow. But tonight, her breathing was peaceful. And I wasn't going to take that from her with explanations or postmortems or adult sorrow disguised as bedtime reassurances. I stepped back and gently closed her door until it clicked. In the dim glow of the hallway, I didn't head straight to bed. I walked instead to my home office, a room barely used these days except for bills and permission slips. The desk lamp cast a circle of soft light onto the wood grain. I sat down slowly and opened the drawer I had started calling my someday drawer. Inside were the things I always meant to deal with but never had. Printouts of text messages from Lindsay asking for help with her car payments. Emails from my mom about overdue electric bills, "Just this one time," she always wrote. A screenshot of the text Lindsay sent after Sophie's preschool graduation. "She seems a little delicate. Are you sure that's normal?" There was even an old envelope, a physical letter from my father asking if I could cover the Wi-Fi bill again since they forgot to cancel the autopay. I paid it, of course, just like I always had. I had kept everything. Not out of spite, but as a record. I think part of me knew I'd need it one day. Not to prove something to them, they'd never accept proof, but to myself. I pulled out a fresh manila folder. On the front, I wrote 3 words in black marker slowly and deliberately. "This is enough." Then I taped the yellow sticky note, the one from Sophie's bag, in the upper corner. Be better next time. Till tilted. Till mocking. But now it was pinned like evidence in a case I hadn't realized I'd been building my whole life. Caleb walked in as I was closing the folder. He didn't ask what I was doing. He just rested his hand on my shoulder and looked at the cover. His thumb brushed the edge of the note. This time, he said quietly, we're not going back. Okay. I nodded. No more chances, I said. No more pretending they didn't mean it. No more smoothing over what they called just jokes. I won't let Sophie carry what I carried. I won't let her believe love is something she has to earn. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt something settle in me, like the last puzzle piece sliding into place after years of holding the wrong ones. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the hallway outside Sophie's door, listening to the sound of her breath and thinking of all the times I had stayed quiet to keep the peace. All the times I was told I was too emotional, too dramatic, too sensitive. All the years I swallowed my own hurt so that others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Sophie. And Sophie deserved a different beginning. Tomorrow I would start the process of clearing things out, both in the house and in my heart. I didn't know exactly what that would look like yet. I didn't need to. I just needed to start. But tonight I would keep watch. I leaned back against the wall, arms wrapped around my knees, and whispered into the silence of the dark house. No one will hurt her again. Not while I still have breath in my chest. The words hung in the air like a promise I wasn't afraid to make anymore. I grew up in a house with 4 bedrooms and 3 witnesses who always saw Lindsay as the light and me as the shadow. And for a long time I believed them. I thought maybe if I was better, quieter, more pleasing, they'd pull me into the warmth. But now I see clearly, the light they gave her wasn't warmth. It was spotlight. Performance. Conditional. And what I want for Sophie is something quieter. Gentler. Something real. As dawn slowly crept across the sky, brushing the tops of the trees with gray-blue light, I stood, stretched my tired limbs, and peeked one more time into Sophie's room. She was still sleeping soundly, one foot peeking out from beneath the blanket, her lips slightly parted. Card she made still tucked beside her like a letter from another world. I didn't need applause, or understanding, or validation from people who only knew how to withhold it. All I needed was this. A child breathing softly in a house where she was safe. And the beginning of something new. I used to think I was just too sensitive. That phrase followed me like a shadow from the time I was old enough to understand words meant more than what they said. Too sensitive when I cried after being teased. Too sensitive when I asked why Lindsay's trophies got shelves and mine got drawers. Too sensitive when I noticed the way my mother's voice softened for my sister and sharpened when it turned to me. Strange, how long you can live in a pattern without knowing it has a name. I grew up in a house just like Lindsay's, polished, picturesque, and full of smiling photos that told only one side of the story. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and 1 daughter who could do no wrong. Lindsay. She was the golden child, the blueprint. The you should learn from her sermon disguised as dinner table conversation. Straight A's. Always brushed her hair before school. Smiled politely at grown-ups. Took dance lessons and played piano, both by choice. And me? I asked too many questions. Got distracted easily. Cried when I didn't understand something, or worse, when I did. I drew on my homework margins. Brought home lopsided clay animals from art class and thought they were beautiful. When I was in 3rd grade, my teacher chose me as Inspiration of the Month because I spent 2 weeks helping a classmate who had trouble reading. She gave me a certificate that smelled like fresh paper and pride. I brought it home, excited, glowing, even. My mom glanced at it once and said, "Your sister was chosen 3 months in a row. But congratulations." Then turned back to her favorite crime drama on TV. There was no cake. No text in the family group chat. No picture of the certificate pinned to the fridge. Just nothing. That was how it always was. Lindsay's successes were family achievements. My moments were tolerated and quickly moved past like background noise. When I got into painting in middle school, I spent hours alone in my room with watercolor palettes and cheap brushes from the grocery store. I wasn't good, not yet, but it calmed me. Helped me make sense of feelings I didn't have words for. My dad walked in one evening, looked at the table full of swirls and colors and said, "You should do something more practical. Like your sister. She's thinking about finance. Art doesn't put food on the table." I nodded. I always nodded. Paintings ended up in the drawer. Then the drawer got closed. Then, eventually, I stopped painting altogether. But I kept drawing. With my body. With my silences. With how I shrank myself around them. Problem was, the more I tried to be what they wanted, the more I disappeared. When Sophie was born, I thought I could rewrite the story. I pictured family holidays with laughter and matching pajamas. Birthday parties where everyone brought gifts and love, no strings attached. I wanted her to have memories. I wanted her to know her grandparents, her aunt, her cousins. I wanted her to be part of something bigger than the two of us. So I forgave. Or at least I tried to. I pushed the hurt aside. The biting comments, the constant comparisons, the unspoken message that I was always one step behind. I told myself, they'll be different with her. They'll love her. And maybe they did. First. But only when she smiled. When she hugged on cue. When she wore the dresses they bought her without complaint. The first time I saw the pattern repeating, Sophie was 4. She wore a purple dress with stars on it to her friend Mia's birthday party. She picked it out herself and twirled around the living room with joy. I took a picture and posted it online. A few hours later, my mom commented, "Not the kind of dress a little girl should wear. Looks like a costume." Lindsay texted me right after with a winking emoji. "Let's hope fashion isn't her calling." Grinning face with sweat. I laughed it off. I typed, "Kids have their own style," and kept scrolling. I told myself I was overreacting. That it was just family teasing. But it never stopped. Comments piled up like soft bricks. Once, Sophie didn't want to hug her grandfather during a holiday visit. She pulled away and hid behind me. "I don't want to be touched," she whispered. My mom's frown was immediate. "Kids these days are so rude," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Who's going to love her acting like that?" Lindsay laughed from the kitchen. "Guess she takes after her mom. So emotional. Loves controlling people." I explained, gently, always gently, that Sophie had sensory sensitivities. That she didn't like sudden touch or loud noises or unfamiliar crowds. That she needed time. Patience. My parents looked at me like I was speaking another language. "You're teaching her to reject basic manners," my dad said, as if it was settled science. I wanted to scream. But I'd learned years ago that screaming only made them more certain I was the problem. I swallowed it. Again. But Sophie didn't. She began to change. Not dramatically. Just in little ways. She paused more before speaking. Watched people's faces like she was scanning for danger. Asked questions she didn't used to ask. "Why does Grandma roll her eyes when I talk? Why doesn't Aunt Lindsay ever say nice things about my pictures?" One afternoon when she was 6, she came home from school with a painting, soft spirals of purple and blue fading into each other like a dream underwater. "What did you paint?" I asked, smiling. She looked down and said, "My feelings. Because I don't know how to say them out loud." I froze. 'Cause I remembered saying the same thing once long ago to my art teacher in 5th grade. I had painted a small child standing in a field of tall flowers. I told her it was me wishing to be seen. That painting ended up in the trash after my mom called it strange. And now Sophie was painting the same silence I once lived in. That night, I called Lindsay. I tried to be calm. I told her the teasing was hurting Sophie. That she needed space and respect, not comments, not correction. That she wasn't too sensitive, she was just herself. Lindsay laughed. Auntie, are you serious? If kids can't handle a few comments, how are they going to survive the real world? Stop projecting your own issues onto her. I hung up. Caleb had been sitting at the kitchen table, half reading, half listening. He didn't look up, but he said quietly, "How many times have they told you you're imagining the problem?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I was watching Sophie, her bare feet swinging off the edge of the couch as she colored in her notebook. A girl who didn't yet know that not all love is safe. A girl who still asked questions expecting honest answers. I couldn't let that part of her disappear. Not the way it had in me. I used to think I could be strong enough to filter it all, to stand in the middle and absorb it like a shield. I believed I could keep their words from reaching Sophie just by deflecting, distracting, softening the blow. But words seep, and silence echoes, and children hear what isn't said. I remember one Christmas morning when Sophie was 5. Lindsay had brought loud toys, ones I had gently asked her not to, bright blinking ones with sirens and beeping sounds. I had explained beforehand that Sophie struggled with overstimulation. I'd even offered alternatives. She ignored me. Right after breakfast, she placed one of the noise toys right in front of Sophie and pressed a button. Sirens screeched, lights flashed. Sophie dropped the toy and covered her ears, her face folding in on itself. She burst into tears. A full-body reaction. Instead of an apology, Lindsay rolled her eyes and said, "This is called real-world training. Life doesn't come with a volume control." I scooped Sophie up and carried her into the guest room where it was quiet. She curled into my lap like she wanted to vanish. Behind me, I could hear my mother mutter something under her breath. Rachel always overreacts. She makes everything so dramatic. I don't remember how long we stayed in that room, but I do remember what Sophie whispered to me through her hiccuped sobs. "Why does Aunt Lindsay laugh when I cry?" I didn't have an answer that day, but I do now. 'Cause it wasn't just Lindsay. It was all of them. My mother, who always dismissed tears as manipulation. My father, who stayed silent because he believed discomfort was weakness. Lindsay, who weaponized charm and mockery like twin blades and had never once said sorry for the damage she left behind. This wasn't just Sophie's story. This was mine. Rewritten in crayon and soft questions, but still made of the same paper cuts. Caleb told me once, during a particularly raw night after Sophie had gone to bed, "If you keep letting them close, Sophie's going to learn how to shrink herself. Just like you did." I knew he was right. I knew it in the way that truth feels when it lands, not like impact, but like recognition. One day, Sophie will be old enough to name it. She'll remember the parties where she was left out, the birthdays where she wasn't seen, the soft tone of her mother's voice when she was hurt, and the cold, dismissive looks from people who shared her blood. And when she does, I don't want to be the one she has to forgive. The day after the party, the day with the bag, I woke before the sun. My mind had barely slept. I watched the first light paint the sky in quiet grays and soft blues. I walked into the kitchen. Caleb was there already, sipping coffee, his eyes still fogged from sleep. When I placed the folder I'd prepared the night before on the table, he looked at it. Then looked at me. He didn't say, "Are you sure?" He didn't ask, "What if they change?" He just nodded, like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had. "Where do we start?" he asked. And in that moment, I realized something I'd never allowed myself to believe before. We weren't alone anymore. Not me. Not Sophie. We had each other. We had Caleb. We had truth. And most importantly, we had the right to protect our peace. That morning, I opened every drawer and folder I had been avoiding for years. I gathered screenshots, bills, birthday texts from Lindsay that came 3 days late and without Sophie's name spelled right. Receipts. Evidence. Journal entries. I labeled them by theme. Dismissal. Neglect. Favoritism. Gaslighting. Financial exploitation. Not for revenge. Not to weaponize. But to finally give the truth a name. A shape. A file. One by one, I printed what I needed. Caleb sat beside me with his laptop, adding a few records I'd forgotten. Phone bills paid in our name. College deposits quietly covered. Text threads where my mother insisted on just a little help until things settle. By afternoon, the folder was full. I looked at it, thick, honest, final, and knew we'd reached the edge of something. This wasn't about a single party. This was about a pattern. And Sophie deserved better than that. That evening, I drove to Lindsay's house. A quiet little suburb in the hills where she had moved a few years back after I helped her cover most of the down payment. I pulled into the driveway and didn't ring the bell. Just stepped up, placed the envelope neatly on her doorstep, and walked back to the car. Caleb sat waiting, the engine running. When I closed the passenger door, he didn't ask how I felt. He didn't need to. We drove home in silence. But this time, it wasn't a silence made of fear or defeat. It was full, like a room after a storm has passed. Something had broken. Something had begun. And that night, I slept beside Sophie again. I brushed the hair from her forehead, watched the slow rise and fall of her breath. I whispered, "You will never have to earn your place in this world." Then I closed my eyes and let the past settle behind me, not gone, not forgotten, but no longer the road I would follow. Tomorrow would be different. Not perfect, but free. The hardest part wasn't making the decision. It was accepting that it had already been made, not in a single moment but in hundreds of small ones. The forgotten birthdays, the mocking texts, the holiday dinners where Sophie was asked to sit still while her cousins were praised for simply showing up. The real decision had been made in all the times I stayed quiet, all the times I held Sophie's hand under the table while she blinked back tears, all the times I told myself next time will be different. There had never been a next time, only the same time over and over. And now, finally, a last time. I sat at my desk for hours that Monday morning, the folder open in front of me like a wound finally cleaned out. The yellow sticky note from Sophie's gift bag, "Be better next time," stared at me like it wanted to blink, to flinch, to apologize. It didn't. Never would. But I wasn't waiting for that anymore. I organized the documents with deliberate care. One section for financial records, bills I had paid for my parents without thanks, deposits I had made into Lindsay's account, just until the car got sorted out. I printed a copy of the email from the previous year when my mother's utilities had been shut off, and she asked me to fix it without ever explaining why it had happened for the third time. Another section for screenshots, texts from Lindsay that alternated between fake warmth and casual cruelty. The one where she joked about Sophie's quirky little habits and said, "Hope she grows out of it or middle school's gonna eat her alive." The one where she asked me to babysit her girls for an entire week so she could take a mental health break, and when I said I wasn't sure, replied, "Wow, must be nice to always have boundaries." I printed excerpts from my old journals, pages where I'd written down verbatim what my mother said when I asked for help after Sophie was diagnosed with sensory processing issues. "You're overreacting. She's just dramatic like you were." I included Sophie's paintings, scanned copies, especially the one she called "Feelings I Don't Know How to Say." And at the very front I placed the note. I didn't write a letter. I didn't offer explanations. I had spent too much of my life explaining myself to people who had no interest in understanding. Instead, I wrote 3 words on the front of the folder. "That's enough now." Then I printed 3 copies. One for us. One for Lindsay. One for Uncle Peter, my mother's younger brother, the only member of our extended family who ever listened without pretending it was an inconvenience. When I was 12, he was the only adult who noticed I always got the smallest slice of cake. When I was 16, he once said, "Sometimes silence in a family is its own kind of violence." He would understand. That afternoon, I drove to Lindsay's house again. The neighborhood looked like something from a curated lifestyle magazine. Symmetrical hedges, identical mailboxes, dogs with collars that matched their owner's athleisure. I didn't ring the bell. I walked to the porch, laid the folder down on the welcome mat like a final offering, and stepped back. Then I walked away without looking back. In the car, Caleb didn't ask what she'd say. He didn't wonder aloud if this would blow over. He didn't say a word, and that silence was a gift I didn't know I needed. When we got home, I emailed the digital version of the folder to every extended relative who had ever asked, "Why don't you come around anymore?" The subject line was simple. In case you ever wondered. That night, I turned off my phone. I knew what was coming. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls. Lindsay's name was at the top of the list, her name appearing again and again like a strobe light. No voicemails. Just texts. Long ones. Short ones. All caps ones. The first one read, "What do you think you're doing?" Then, "You just destroyed this family over a joke." Then, "You've always been jealous and now you're turning everyone against me." And finally, "You need help. This is borderline harassment. If you don't stop, I'll get a lawyer." There were messages from my mother, too. Her tone was different. Still familiar, but different. Wrapped in emotional packaging she thought would soften the sting. "Rachel, please. You're better than this. Don't ruin everything over old feelings. We all make mistakes. But family is about forgiveness." Another email came later in the afternoon, subject line, "Let the past rest." I didn't open it right away. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside. There would be talk of blood ties, of history, of how she never meant to hurt me. There would be lines like, "You've always been so emotional, and you took things the wrong way." What there wouldn't be, what there never was an apology. That night, while Sophie napped on the couch, curled under her soft lavender blanket with her bear tucked under her chin, I opened the envelope my mother had mailed by hand. The stationery was cream-colored with a floral border. Her handwriting was neat and practiced, the same one she used to correct my spelling tests in second grade. But the message was the same old song. Family is never perfect, but it's the only place to turn when everything else falls apart. You're cutting off the most valuable bond you'll ever have. You can't keep holding on to petty grudges from the past. Think of Sophie. She needs her grandparents, her aunts and uncles, her cousins. And then, at the bottom, if you don't come back, someday Sophie will blame you for taking her family away. I stared at the words for a long time. Not because they shocked me, but because they didn't. Not even a little. I walked to the drawer where the folder lived, pulled out a sticky note, wrote one sentence. "I used to miss my family, too." I placed it inside the envelope and mailed it back. No signature. No explanation. A few days later, Lindsay made a post on Facebook. Long, dramatic. Public. It wasn't directed at me by name, but everyone who knew us knew. She wrote about betrayal. About private matters being aired online by someone who wants to play victim. About how sisters should lift each other up instead of torching years of closeness over misunderstandings. Comments poured in. Friends of hers, the kind who still used high school nicknames, tagged each other, posted heart emojis, said things like, "You're such a strong mama, and you don't choose your family, but you can choose forgiveness." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. A few hours later, I got a private message from my cousin Camille in Oregon, someone I hadn't spoken to since college. If what you wrote in that file is true, she owes you more than just an apology. She owes you years. I don't know how far the folder will spread. I don't know who will take sides, who will pretend not to have seen it, who will quietly thank me and still go to Thanksgiving anyway. But I do know this. For the first time in my life, I don't feel wrong for telling the truth. For choosing peace over pretending. For not answering the phone. That weekend, Caleb and I closed every open line of support. The phone plan still tied to my father's number, closed. The insurance payments we'd been covering for my mom, canceled. The college fund for Lindsay's oldest daughter, the one we'd been contributing to just until things stabilized, ended with a single email and one click. No rage. No announcements. Just closure. 3 days later, there was a knock at our door. I looked through the peephole. It was my mother. Her eyes were red. She held a small envelope in her hand. She looked both tired and determined, like she'd come not to listen but to lecture. I didn't open the door. Caleb stood beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. My mother slipped the envelope into the mailbox. After she left, I opened it. It was a card. The kind you get from a pharmacy shelf. The front said, "Thinking of you." Inside, in her careful cursive, "Family is where we forgive each other. Don't let little things destroy blood ties." I took the sticky note from the folder, the one I had prepared for this exact moment, and wrote beneath it, "It's not a little thing when it happens for years." I slipped the note back into the card and returned it to the mailbox. That night I slept. Not restlessly. Not half waiting for another message or call or apology that would never come. I slept. And in that sleep, I didn't dream of old houses or places where I sat in the corner while applause went to someone else. I didn't dream of tight smiles or knowing sighs or being told I was too much. I dreamed of nothing. And it was the most peaceful night I could remember in years. It didn't happen all at once. There was no great cleansing. No thunderstorm of finality. Just 100 quiet mornings that felt lighter than the one before. A week passed. Then 2. The silence from my family was no longer ominous. It was welcome. It no longer hummed like a threat beneath the floorboards. It became stillness. A reprieve. And in that stillness, Sophie began to bloom. I noticed it first in the way she laughed. Not that nervous little check-the-room laugh she used to do, the one she used like a question, "Am I okay here?" No, this laugh was different. Freer. Like something unfastened inside her chest and opened the windows. She made 2 new friends in her Tuesday art class, Emma and Grace, girls from our neighborhood who wore mismatched socks and swapped friendship bracelets without ceremony. They played on the lawn after class and made up dances and stories and entire worlds using only chalk and their imagination. One afternoon, I watched from the kitchen window as Grace tied a green yarn bracelet onto Sophie's wrist. Her whole face lit up like she'd just been given a medal. I felt something catch in my throat, not pain this time, but relief. No one told her she was too sensitive. No one told her to smile more. No one asked her to shrink. Inside our home, the air changed too. We let go of the parts that didn't belong. I took down the framed photo of my parents that had hung near the stairs. Not in anger. Just because it no longer reflected something real. I replaced it with a new picture, Sophie and Caleb and me all holding ice cream cones, laughing mid-bite. A little blurry, a little messy. Ours. Sophie and I redid her bedroom. She picked out new bedding with pastel swirls like watercolors. She said it looked like the sky after it rains. We strung paper lanterns around the room, warm golden ones that replaced the nightlight my mother once said would make her nerves weak. Caleb bought her a new bookshelf for the living room. Sophie filled it with picture books, journals, and art supplies. On the top shelf, she placed the painting she once called My Feelings. She doesn't call it that anymore. Now it's just Sky Swirl. A few days later, she drew something new and brought it to me as I was working on the grocery list. It was a little house surrounded by a garden of rainbow flowers. 3 stick figures stood in front, one with long brown hair, one with a beard, and one small one in a purple dress. On the roof, she had written in neat print, "Where I get to be myself." I pinned it on the fridge, right next to the meal plan and my scribbled work notes. It was an ordinary moment, but it felt like a miracle. One Saturday, Sophie was invited to speak at her school's Family Day event. Each student got to read a short paragraph they had written about someone important to them. Sophie chose me. She wore her lilac dress, the same one she'd worn to the birthday party. I had offered to buy her a new one, but she said, "I want to wear this one again. I don't want it to be a sad dress forever." She held my hand tightly as we walked into the school auditorium, her eyes scanning the rows of chairs. When it was her turn, she stepped up to the microphone. Her voice wobbled at first, then steadied. She said, "Home is where I'm trusted and loved. My mom is my home, and that's where I feel safe." That was it. 3 sentences. I tried not to cry. I failed. Not out of grief, but because I could see, clear as daylight, that I had given her the thing I never had. Safety without condition. Love without earning. A childhood she didn't need to recover from. That night, Caleb took us out for ice cream. Sophie picked a flavor called Moonlight Cookie and ate it with both hands. Her cheeks were sticky and her nose had a smudge of chocolate. She was all joy. On the drive home, she asked, "Mom, if Aunt Lindsay texts you again, will you be mad?" I smiled, brushing a crumb from her cheek. "No, honey. I won't be mad. But I don't need to reply either." She frowned a little. "Why?" "Because sometimes," I said, "the strongest thing we can do is stay silent and keep living well." Sophie nodded slowly. "I want to live well, too. Just like you." "In the rearview mirror," Caleb smiled. "Not the kind of smile you show, the kind you feel. Kind that says, we did the right thing." That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, I sat alone in the office, the soft yellow light of my desk lamp casting shadows across the surface. The folder was still there. Closed now. Tidy. Complete. Beside it sat the card from my mother, "Thinking of you," and the sticky note I had added. It's not a little thing when it happens for years. I looked at all of it, then slowly reached for the drawer, slid the folder inside. Not to forget it, not to pretend it didn't happen, but to let it rest, because it had served its purpose. For years, I thought healing would feel like fire, like burning everything down. But it doesn't. Sometimes healing feels like walking through your house barefoot without flinching. Like watching your daughter sleep and knowing no one will make her question her worth. Like waking up without dread in your stomach. Like laughing over burnt pancakes on a Sunday morning and not apologizing for the mess. Like realizing you haven't thought about your sister in days and it doesn't hurt anymore. A few weeks later, my phone buzzed. It was Lindsay. Just 6 words. "Are you happy now? You won." I read the message 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I was checking if I felt anything. Did it hurt? Was I angry? Was I satisfied? No. I felt nothing at all. 'Cause this was never a competition. There were no winners. No losers. There was just me, a woman who broke the silence. And Sophie, a child growing up without having to hide her feelings. Without being told she was too much. Without learning that love must be earned by disappearing. That was my prize. And it was enough.